I'm doing a 5 things I love, 5 things I hate on my 2016 Honda Rancher. I bought this brand new in 2016. So this is kind of like a 5-year review. I have 1,650 miles. There you go. 650 miles-ish. And here she is. I'll get into it in a second. So I'm going to start with the likes. Number 1, I like the Honda reliability and the familiarity. I've owned several Hondas, so I just like that it is very Honda. The controls are laid out perfect in my opinion. The ergonomics are great. Your seat width isn't too wide, although on these 420s they're a lot wider than the old 350s. But I don't know, you get on an old 3-wheeler from the 80s and you get on this and there's just like the same familiarity. There's just like they ooze Honda, if that makes sense. So that's number 1. Number 2, this thing has torque for days. I know it's not a Foreman with the low range or the lower gears, but honestly, first gear in this thing is pretty low. I mean, I have pulled a Honda Pilot, so 4,500 pounds I pulled with this thing in first gear. So it has plenty of torque. I like that if you go up to a tree that's laying down or a bump and you nail it first or second gear, it's gonna do a wheelie over it. So that's kind of fun. I like the instant torque. I like that it's almost jerky, which is, in my opinion, awesome compared to most CVTs. Number 3, for me, shifting. Like, I still prefer to shift. This is a foot shift model. I love everything about it. Long trail rides, it can get to be a little bit of a pain, but overall, I prefer to shift. That brings us into number 4, nimble handling and lightweight. Like, I understand this is a utility machine, basically a tractor. I joke around and call it the Farmall. But with the straight axle and its lightweight, this thing handles almost great on trails. If you set the preload a little stiff in the front, it handles flat because of the straight axle. And you can slide this thing like you're giggling like a little schoolgirl, because this thing just drifts like a monster. Even though it has very little power, it's still really fun to drive, and I love the straight axle. And number 5, I like the engineering that's gone into it. In my opinion, I had a 2005 Rancher 350 ES. It looked more finished because it had the black flares here, and it had the dual taillights, and to me it looked less cheap. These 420s seem to look a little cheaper. However, I like that the whole panel comes off in one piece. Really easy. The seat comes off easy. It's just easier to service, and I do like the EFI. However, in extremely cold temperatures, 20 below, this doesn't like to start where my carbureted one would with different jetting. Now I'm going to get into the 5 things I dislike about this. Wouldn't even say hate, but dislike. And this is probably on everybody's list for these, and that is very little storage. You know the story, I got a tow strap in there, and that's about it. You can't fit much more in there. So I wish I had more storage, but you can always add on a box. Not a deal breaker. The second thing I dislike about this is it's slowish. Yeah, it's not very fast. It doesn't have much horsepower. It's plenty torquey, and you can drive these things extremely spirited and have a blast on them. I mean, they are fun. But on open roads and stuff, they really show that they're slow. Mine goes 53. It's speed limited at 53. Again, not a deal breaker. Wish it had a little bit more power. Of course, everybody does, but that's number 2. Number 3, the stock tires. They suck. I mean, everything about them. They're small. I mean, I wish this thing had at least 25s from the factory. It could definitely turn them easy, 25, 26, whatever. But the tread pattern isn't great. They wear okay. For 1,650 miles, these are okay. They handle really well as far as sliding and stuff, and they're nice and soft. But they're not very puncture resistant. They don't have good tread. They're not great tires. And number 4, this is probably on everybody's list too. The legendary Honda 3-wheel drive. So yes, I love that it has a real cable going into the diff to select your 4-wheel drive. Very reliable. I can see the kids are driving the 4-wheelers around the yard. I could see that it's in 2 or 4-wheel drive. There's no button to go bad. I like that. I don't like that it doesn't have a locking front diff. Yes, you can do the brake trick. It helps for me 20% of the time. But it would be nice if it had a locker. This brings me into the 5th dislike. And of course, again, everything here is my own personal opinion. But the stock shifter sucks. It's designed for farmers with big boots and everything like that. I get it. But you have to lift your knee practically over your head to shift. And then the splines are very coarse, so if you move it down a spline, you can't get anything underneath. You can't even get a shoe underneath. So I've had to take off the shifter and cut it here and bend it back and weld it. And then I also had to cut it here and bend it up and re-weld it and then repaint it. So if I didn't modify the shifter, I would hate driving this thing. Now that I modified it, I could wear a shoe or a thin boot, and it's perfect. The throw is still a little high because I'm used to my sport quad, but it's good. So that's my 5th gripe. So how's the reliability been? 5 years, 1,600 miles. I know that's not a lot of miles. I just recently moved to the country where I can ride, but I was in town for the last 5 years basically, so I couldn't ride anywhere. Anyway, reliability. It always starts. It's never not started unless it's really cold. You can see one of my videos, 25 degrees below 0, it didn't want to start. It did when it was newer, so the battery could be getting weak because it is the original battery. But overall, absolutely flawless reliability as far as starting, moving, everything like that. I have had a couple issues though, but they're not very big. Issue number 1, and this could have went into my dislikes, but I wanted to count it as an issue. This steering bushing squeaks. It did right away when it was new. You spray some type of fluid in there and try to get it to not squeak, and that lasts a day. I eventually had to take the whole bushing out and grease it, and that worked for about a year, but it's starting to squeak again. That's annoying. So I don't know if it's inferior material or what the story is with that. The second issue, and it's an annoying one, is this stupid ring right here. Comes loose off the drive shaft, and then it bounces around and makes noise. And I've put it back on a couple times, and this time I pinched it with like channel locks on the flange and put some Loctite on there, and it seems to be holding. But that's annoying. That's like I don't expect any issues when I buy a Honda. That's just the way I am, and that little kind of stuff pisses me off. It's not a big deal, but it's annoying. Another issue I've had, and it's completely my fault because I'm a jackass. I was going through the woods, like just making trail through trees and running over everything, and somehow I managed to dislodge a wire on the front diff, and the 4-wheel drive worked fine, but it thought it was in 4-wheel drive on the display, and that wouldn't go away until I figured out that that wire was knocked loose. I just put it back on and it was fine. But it was because I was being an idiot, running over like sequoia trees and being a dick. So other than that, but it's a little vulnerable in the stock form. This thing's completely stock skid plates and arm guards and all that. So that's my experience with this Rancher. Would I buy it again? Yes, I love it. I mean, it's slow, but it's like totally workhorse. I use it every day. It's dirty, don't care. I change the oil once a year on the thing. You know, like, I'm not nice to it. I don't drive it up to the handlebars in water either, but I've been in there pretty deep, and it's pretty flawless. It's a good machine. Good enough that I bought a 2017 DCT for the wife, and I'll be doing a review on that. I don't have much miles on that one, or that I've driven it, but maybe I'll do a comparison later and see.